The Constitution is a contract between the government and its people. As a result, it has been argued within the legal circles that what the Constitution says is as important as what it does not say. The Bill of Rights is simply a series of amendments to the Constitution which clearly delineates what the government can, and more importantly, cannot do in terms of regulating individual thought and behavior.
All rights must accrue to all human beings equally, and that is something the ICJ has sought to entrench in the Kenyan legal system.
Therefore, this role of the Bill of Rights dovetails with the assumption that the people inherently have the power and turn specific powers to the government. In exchange of these powers, the government in turn agrees to do certain things, including protection of its citizens from attack by a foreign country, the violence of another individual, and so on.
Without rights, there cannot be real democracy. And therefore, trying to educate people on their rights and to give them the tools to be able to enforce these rights at that lower end. But ICJ is also active at the higher end, which is engaging in policy formulation, advocacy with government institutions, working towards reform of the judiciary.
Furthermore, just because the Constitution says that you have certain rights does not mean that you do not have other rights which the Constitution did not bother to enumerate.
1963 Constitution, as you all know, is rather deficient in the protection of human rights, both in the substance of the rights and in the mechanisms which are provided for their enforcement.
When the fight for a new constitution started in Kenya, ICJ linked up together with Kenya Human Rights Commission and I think the Law Society and drafted what was called Kenya Tuitakayo Katiba Mpya, which was a model constitution. That was the first time it was happening in Kenya, and it was a very informative and useful tool in actually saying we just don't want to make noise, we want a new constitution, this is how it should look like.
The Bill of Rights was designed to counter the argument. If we list certain rights, then it must be supposed that those are the only rights the people have.
If you look at the wording of the various rights that are entrenched in the Constitution, you will find that we have a fairly good Bill of Rights. The challenge has been mainly compliance with what the Bill of Rights calls for. When you look at how those rights are realized, I think that is really where the problem comes in, and particularly with regard to the government vis-a-vis the private individual.
We expect that when the Constitution comes out, it will be clearer even on the civil and political rights and expand them to the point that citizens would actually enjoy more rights than they have been granted by the current Constitution.
Among the rights included in the Bill of Rights are the freedom of peaceful assembly, freedom of religion and protection from religion, freedom of speech or of the press, right of the people to petition the government for redress of grievances, right of speedy and public trial, freedom to participate in democratic processes, and most importantly, the right to life.
This country is still governed under an Official Secrets Act, which proceeds from the point of view that all information held by government is secret unless proved otherwise. And ICJ has been at the forefront of leading a coalition of NGOs and activists in opening up government so that the rule becomes that every information held by government is our information, and we are entitled to it, and there can only be a few exceptions on recognized grounds why information should not be released.
In regards to respect for human rights, ICJ has participated in all legal commissions. When you talk about the Kriegler Commission, when you talk about the commission which was investigating the post-election violence, ICJ has been very vocal and has presented non-partisan contribution, offering solution to the problems that the country is facing.
ICJ has played a big role in expanding the flow and freedom of information in Kenya. It has partnered with the ICT Consumer Association of Kenya. Mr. Alex Gakuru, its chairman, gives us an insight of this.
Our interaction with ICJ started several years ago
upon the realization of our mutual interaction would lead to benefit to consumers in the context of information, and also in the sense that ICJ also needs to understand what consumers need. So we found a mutual beneficial area where we could interact.
ICJ has also partnered with the Alternative Media Association of Kenya.
We realized that in previous years, when the media was pretty much controlled by government, so to speak, and there came just a little opportunity to allow for private investment in the media, and lots of radio stations started coming up which were run by private individuals or even private companies. It became necessary for us to actually seek a partnership with ICJ in pushing for freedom of information.
Ikawa ni mteja, iko busy, no, jaribu later.
ICJ Kenya shows solidarity with other human rights organizations by an annual nomination of peoples who have made an outstanding yearly contribution in promotion of human rights with an award dubbed Jurist of the Year.
The Jurist of the Year award is an annual event hosted by ICJ Kenya. The award seeks to reward and recognize the efforts of personalities who promote the adherence to the rule of law and protection of human rights.
ICJ Kenya operates under 5 programmatic areas: international cooperation, human rights education, policy research and advocacy, judicial reforms, and organizational development.
With the Kenyan chapter, we have had a relationship for many years. We have published books together, and we have also done events. Our books deal mainly with human rights issues, with constitutional issues. One book we did with the ICJ was on ethnicity, human rights and constitutionalism in Kenya. And we do an annual publication with them, the Judiciary Watch, about rule of law developments all over Africa, important facts and events.
The other useful publication that they have printed is on the rule of law. So I think historically the documents and the publications that they have produced have been very useful resources for practitioners of the law, both in civil society and those who are engaged in active legal practice.
Apart from financial support, ICJ Kenya is inextricably linked with its partners through studies, research, and reports of varying issues within the legal spectrum.
By and large, we'll consider them a mature organization, but they are always recognizing that with the changing environments, there is always need for them to adjust in certain ways. And whenever they realize that need, we find them humble enough to request for it from an organization like PACT Kenya that's definitely not celebrating 50 years. And the kind of support that we have to offer, we found ICJ to be extremely receptive.
We have also worked with local artists to try and popularize the Freedom of Information campaign among the youth. So we have worked with local artists and we have produced a song that is dubbed Mteja.
Hiyo wimbo inatakikana kuambia serikali ya kwamba isiendelee kushika wananchi wa mteja, si ndio?
Kajaribu kupiga simu.
The word Mteja was coined to reflect the government that does not listen to people. A government that cannot be found, a government that cannot be heard. Because without an access to information, you cannot engage your institutions of governance. So to us, Mteja has been used by our locals to mean cannot be found.
The ICJ have been responsible for bringing to our attention critical areas that need reform, particularly the judiciary.
ICJ Kenya prides itself in its strong structures, policies and procedures that led to the organization being declared the 2009 Civil Society of the Year in Governance and Management category. This is a major milestone for the organization, and our work will not stop here.
For us to have won that governance and management category, it is quite a lot of work, because that's when you talk about systems, that's when you talk about procedures and all things that makes an organization run the way it's supposed to run.
Among the capacity building initiatives that ICJ Kenya has is the internship program, where young lawyers who have just graduated from universities are mentored in human rights work.
I think for me, coming into ICJ this time was quite a privilege, because we're celebrating 50 years, and it's just, you get to see everything that this organization has been doing over the last 50 years, and it's very humbling.
ICJ is result-oriented, and previously, having been through law school and working in a law firm setting, we do a lot of complaining and a lot of rhetoric. But here, it's result-oriented in the sense that we go on the ground, we remedy the situation.
Just like any other successful organizations, ICJ Kenya cannot be vindicated of any bottlenecks, whether in the past, present, or future. An obvious challenge is funding. Although it has sufficient donors of reputable credibility, the issue lies in expanding its activities to gain more effective clout, as opposed to maintaining the status quo, which has the negative potential of clogging the operations of the organization.
We've got to make do with very small budgets. It's a sense of the work is much, but the resources for doing that work are always limited. So that is an overriding limitation to achieving the things that we would like to achieve.
Most of our activities are actually dictated by the proposal we send to our donors. So when they approve the project, then we'll only implement what they've given unto us. And I need to say that this year, as much as we are having now the admin budget, that needs to be catered by the donors. Most of them, with the limitation, with basketization of funds nowadays, they don't really want to fund coordination and admin costs.
I can cite two main challenges which we face in project funding is that of delayed funding by the donor agencies, which amounts to delayed implementation of the programs.
But however insurmountable the challenges may appear, the Kenyan section of the International Commission of Jurists will keep its aims and objectives focused, borrow international best practices and standards to complement our work in the region. For this is the guiding beacon that gives them the fidelity to stay true to their mission to influence the policy and legislative framework and create an informed citizenry to secure democratic governance, rule of law, and the respect of human rights. It has been a long journey, but it has been worth the 50 years. Later.